Hey, folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio. As you know, I interview a lot of people connected with the Beatles, authors, musicians, friends of the Beatles, and lots of Beatle podcasters. In fact, we have one with us on today's show. You may also know that I like to interview just about everybody to get their opinions on the Beatles. You can learn from first generation fans, second, third, the newest fans. It's always important to me to know what a new fan thinks of the Beatles, how they're discovering them, what they think about their solo music, to get their own views, their own perspectives on it. It could be incredibly different from those of us who grew up on the Beatles when they were around, or depending upon what decade you got into the Beatles. It's all very fascinating to me. And my guest this time out is another Beatle podcaster. In fact, he is, so far, the youngest guest I've had here on the show. He just recently turned the ripe old age of 14. And he hosts a Beatles podcast called I Know, named after one of my favorite John Lennon songs. It was on the Mind Games album. We welcome Hudson Ranney to our show.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken. I'm very happy to be here and really excited.
I know that you're a fan of the podcast shows that I do, Things
Yes.
We Said Today and Talk More Talk. And I want to know, first of all, before we get to the main part of our show, which is that you wanted to do a Fab Five show, how you first got into the Beatles. What age was that?
That was the ripe old age of 8 years old. And interestingly enough, it was not a Beatles album. It was a John Lennon solo album.
Cool.
Imagine, my grandfather got me a turntable for my birthday, and there was a stack of albums. I think the other one was like the Beach Boys' Surfing Safari, which is a great record.
Mhm.
And Imagine, and then a Johnny Cash one. I'm also a big Johnny Cash fan, interestingly enough. So,
It helps to have these albums around the house.
yeah. I've got like a stack, and I've got probably about close to 300 records. So
Okay. Was your grandfather an influence on your musical taste?
yeah, somewhat. He is a Beatles fan. I mean, he literally adores the Sirius XM channel, and every time I get something new on my computer, I always put more Beatles and solo stuff on his iPod.
I bet he loves you for that. He's got an iPod.
Yes.
Okay. He's a hip grandfather.
He has still not gotten a cell phone. Well, a smartphone.
Oh, okay. So you started with Imagine. Where did you go from there?
So 8 years old would have been 2015. And I thought this was the 50th anniversary that I got Sergeant Pepper, but no, it was the 49th actually. And I got Pepper, it was a really nice mint copy, like original mono. And as a record collector, I mean, that's a really nice copy to have. And let's just say it's not very nice anymore.
Worn it out, huh?
Yes. And I fell in love. And then from there, I got the White Album. I'd gotten Wings Greatest as well. I think I got Extra Texture as my first George album, interestingly enough, which I know you're a big fan of, and I am too.
Mm-hmm. Well, all the solo music I'm a fan of, but
except Gratitude.
Okay, all right. He knows everything I like and what I don't like at this point. So nothing that I say is going to surprise you at this point, probably.
You never know.
I like that song though.
Yeah, true.
But just so that I know, so as you were growing up in these 6 years since age 8, it's been just a mixture of the group and the solo at the same time, or did you try to listen to albums chronologically? I know you said you started with Sgt. Pepper as far as the Beatles group stuff. So was it all just a mishmash, whatever was thrown your way?
I mean, I live in a rural area and I'm not a fan of streaming, so it's very hard to come across records. I mean, I have to travel an hour to get to a record store.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of just whatever came out. And surprisingly, the album that got me into Paul McCartney was Wildlife.
Okay. Was that your first?
I think so. Other than Wings Greatest, I think it was Wildlife and Speedway.
Mm-hmm.
and then Plastic Ono Band, and then I think I got Mind Games, and I've collected pretty much all of the ones that are available on vinyl easily, but stuff like Off the Ground and Driving Rain I've gotten on CD because I'm not gonna get a lobotomy to get a copy on vinyl.
Okay, but as you're collecting the solo stuff, you're still discovering the group.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I think it was, and then I got a lot of the Capitol albums, and then then I just streamed all the stuff just so I was familiar with it. Because the beginning of your fandom, you're just hungry for more of it, and I'm always hungry for more music.
Mm-hmm.
But,
so the Capitol albums you bought as vinyl albums, or
yeah,
okay, so you listened to them as they came out in America. You didn't just stream random songs.
Yeah, and I am a fan of those Capitol albums, which we'll get to in a minute.
Okay. All right, very good. But my point is, in these 6 years, you've been hit with all this music, group and solo.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so much to absorb. I remember when I first started out doing Beatles shows in 1982, and then I took my show to WDHA in New Jersey, and I would have a young teenager like yourself who knew all the music and all the solo music up to that point, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. This kid knows all this stuff. And we're talking 40 years later, practically. So you have all this other music. Do you really know all the solo stuff too?
I know about 98.9%. I'm not familiar with all of Paul's B-sides and unreleased tracks, and I'm not super familiar with the Return to Pepperland sessions. And I've only played Kisses on the Bottom maybe 3 times because I'm really not in the mood to listen to that album. And I'm also not super familiar with maybe the Postcards from Paradise album from Ringo, and what's the one from 2010? Why Not?
Right.
Those ones I could still brush up on, but other than that, I've heard pretty much everything.
Wow. And do you know them? Would you say you know the other albums thoroughly?
Yeah.
How does someone so young get to store all that in his brain? I mean, when I was 14, if I knew 20 to 30 albums really well, I knew all the Beatles albums and I knew all the solo stuff up until then. But, it's still a lot of material. And you like other music too.
Yeah, I'm a massive Bob Dylan fan, and I'm a massive Fleetwood Mac fan and a Zeppelin fan, all the good stuff. And I'm a cross country runner, so I listen to a lot of it while I run. So I guess that kind of opens up more time. And then with COVID, I really just listened to probably a solo album every day.
Very good.
As much as I could.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Dude. Okay, but since you mentioned other artists like Fleetwood Mac and Led Zeppelin, even though Fleetwood Mac's still around today, are you more of a 70s person or 60s? Is there a decade that appeals to you the most?
I think it's the 70s, some early 80s stuff. I'm not the biggest 80s fans, but I do like some of the stuff.
Mm-hmm. Are you kind of against all the techno pop that happened in the 80s?
Somewhat. It's a little too right for me.
There's a lot of Beatle fans that feel the same way as you do. A lot of the ones that grew up in the 60s and 70s and couldn't adapt to changes in music, even from the second half of the 70s on to
they
disco.
Were not looking for changes.
That's very good. Thank you. You're really impressing me.
I like a lot of the 90s stuff too. I'm a big Bare Naked Ladies fan.
Okay.
And a big Pearl Jam fan.
I'm only now starting to like Pearl Jam. So I couldn't take Eddie Vedder's voice for a long time, and I've gotten used to it now. It's kind of like, really, Bob Dylan, I always recognized as being a great songwriter, but I couldn't handle his voice for the longest time, and I gradually got used to it. By the time Blood on the Tracks came out in 1975, I loved Bob Dylan. But in the very beginning, couldn't handle his voice. So maybe it's the same thing with Eddie Vedder for me.
What is your favorite Bob Dylan album?
Well, I don't have all of his albums, but I do love Blood on the Tracks a lot.
Oh, that's the correct answer, so I'm happy.
Hey, if you say that, then I know I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
But why don't we talk about, well, before we do the Fab Five, since you said you wanted to bring up the Capitol albums, what did you want to say about them?
Well, that might be one of my choices.
Oh, all right. Then we'll mix that into the conversation.
Yeah.
But in the Fab Five for new viewers of this channel, that's when I ask my guests to pick 5 albums, one from each solo Beatle, one Beatles album that happen to be the albums that you listen to the most today. And I've stressed that they don't have to be what you consider the best albums from each Beatle or Beatles album or your favorite in that category. Just what you feel like hearing the most at this moment. And perhaps more importantly, why you feel that way. So I'm going to mix things up as I tend to do here on this show. And we're going to start with George Harrison.
Good thing. I will say this is my number 1 Harrison album, hands down.
Okay. Wow. Very impressed with that. Why do you feel the way you do? But this is what you listen to the most now. If you're going to pick a George Harrison album, this is the one.
My runner-up is 33 1/3.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a masterpiece. All Things Must Pass. I don't have the time to sit down to listen to a double album every day. I think this is the most consistent on this album. I think if Any Road was released in the 70s, it would have been a number 1 hit.
You're sounding like me, Hudson.
Yeah,
I say that a lot in my podcast.
I love P2 Vatican Blues. I mean, picking on the Catholic religion. I mean, that's just classic George.
Uh-huh.
Looking for My Life. I mean, if we're talking best songwriting lyrics, this is his best songwriting. I know you feel this way about Living in the Material World, about this is his Plastic Ono Band to me, with Living in the Material World, like tied with it. But I do wish that Horse to the Water could have been on this album. I think I actually prefer Rocking Chair in Hawaii, like the one that he did around All Things Must Pass era. I prefer that demo, I think, on Beware of Atco.
Right.
I'm not a huge fan of the one on this album. Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea is wonderful. It doesn't seem like a posthumous release. And I feel like with Milk and Honey, you could tell that it was a posthumous release. I mean, it felt kind of just thrown together almost. I didn't know this was a posthumous release for a long time. And when I first heard it, and then I was like, really? And Milk and Honey, I kind of just guessed from hearing it.
Did you say Brainwashed could have come out a year or 2 years after Cloud 9? It sounds like it.
Vocally wise, I don't think so. You can definitely hear that. I think I have a weird theory that George's voice kind of started to get it almost like Bob Dylan and his voice married after the Traveling Wilburys. He started to get a little bit of a Bob Dylan accent. I mean, very twangy, like you can kind of, and I really could hear that on the Traveling Wilburys albums. It just started to get weaker. And I mean, Cloud 9 had such a strong vocal from him. I mean, everything on that album was perfect vocally.
You don't think George's vocals on Handle with Care was great?
Well, they were obviously great, but like I was thinking more like Traveling Wilburys Volume 3. Like if you play She's My Baby in the back of your head, you can kind of hear his voice when he comes in. She's like a baby. You can kind of hear it twang back a little bit.
Okay, I don't know if I hear that, but hey, these are your ears. I will say, I've always felt that Pisces Fish sounds like a Dylan song to me.
It does.
Yeah. Lyrically, the way it's structured, I can kind of hear Bob singing it.
I could.
Yeah. But what I've said about living in the material world being George's plastic on all band, I felt that way because I think that the songs that he wrote lyrically are even more personal than they were on All Things Must Pass. I think Be Here Now is one of the most powerful messages in his songs, and The Light That Has Lighted the World and Who Can See It. Those particular songs, the message he's trying to convey to his fans is very, very powerful.
I agree.
But, you know, he's had that throughout all of his albums. And yet there's a lot of, in Brainwash, you take a song like Looking for My Life, where you feel like he's writing this knowing what's about to happen to him.
Yeah.
And even Stuck Inside a Cloud to some degree, even though that was written around 77, 78, Jim Keltner has said. He remembered hearing that song around then.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that went back that far. I thought that was from the Contrapo sessions.
Well, based on what I remember Jim Keltner saying, he remembered hearing the song around that time. I'm not saying the recording is from that time. I'm just saying that George wrote it around then. He remembered hearing the song then. But the interesting thing about Brainwash is that it's kind of like it's a hodgepodge of all these songs that George wrote through the years, some of which he obviously didn't release, but they were hanging around. He was picking them up, plus the newer songs that he had written. So, yeah, but it's really a powerful album. Absolutely. Never Get Over You. It's one of my favorite ballads of his.
It is. And it doesn't have the Jeff Lynne. You can tell Cloud Nine is kind of Jeff Lynne-y.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Jeff Lynne as a producer, as we'll talk about Paul, but soon. But I mean, it doesn't sound like a Jeff Lynne album, except for maybe Rising Sun a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the instructions that Jeff was given around that time for Brainwash was for it to be less posh.
Yeah.
Those were the words that were used. So they wanted Jeff to be a bit more restrained. And you can hear that in Brainwash, definitely. All right. So why don't you name John next?
I'm going to throw a curve. I think you know what I'm going to pick, but you don't. I really like this album.
I'm going to guess. You definitely threw a curve.
Were you going to guess Mind Games?
No, I was going to guess Walls and Bridges.
Well, that's Mind Games and Walls and Bridges are tied with this.
Yeah.
But I mean, I really like the rock and roll roots of John in this album. I think everybody trashes it, and he sounds drunk, and Phil Spector is all over this album, and I like Phil Spector a lot to an extent. But Bebop-A-Lula, Stand By Me is a masterpiece classic.
Uh-huh.
I think this is the best arrangement of that. I love Slippin' and Slidin'. I love his version of Ain't That a Shame. I cannot stand Paul's version of Ain't That a Shame.
Okay, how come?
The production on that song is just so bad, I think. It's
pretty raw, the Russian album. So some people like that aspect.
Yeah.
And so
the Russian album is my least favorite McCartney album besides Pipes of Peace, but a whole other story for that. But I love You Can't Catch Me. I prefer the Ya Ya on this than I do to the Walls and Bridges one. But
well, that's kind of, he's put on there only because he captured Julian on drums.
Yeah, which is cute and all, but
yeah, the Phil Spector aspect of it, the version that came out of Rock and Roll only had 4 Phil Spector produced songs.
Yeah.
So I never, even though you've heard the whole story of what happened in LA with Phil Spector, I don't feel like it's a Phil Spector produced album because most of it is a leaner production, and you can tell John's production from Phil's production. But and the whole bit about sounding drunk, there's the bootlegs of John during Just Because, sounding that way. But the version that's on the album and everything else, I would never think that he was drunk.
It may be my turntable because it sometimes has an echoey vibe, and that's just probably my ears.
Okay. But I really love the arrangements of the songs. Probably the only one that I've ever had a problem with is Do You Want to Dance?
Yeah, I'm not big on that one.
Kind of a reggae-ish, arrangement, but I don't think it worked as well as all the other songs on the album. That's just me. But, and I actually love when songs are slowed down from the original.
I will agree with that.
I love Sweet Little 16 on there. And I like the song with horns. If you're used to hearing just Chuck Berry's version, here's a much more full-blown production of it. But but no, I love Slippin' and Slidin' is kick-ass. No doubt about it. It's such a killer. That's a song that I would love to have seen him do live if he had toured.
Yeah.
Even though he did it on the TV special for Sulu Great, but I mean, as part of an ongoing tour, I would love that. That would be a perfect song towards the end, one of the encores, I think. But I'm glad you like rock and roll. It gets knocked. I just think that if you're like me, and I think a lot of fans think this way, you don't place the albums that are primarily covers in the same category as all original songs.
No, you don't. And my runners-up, these are my two favorite Lennon albums and probably my two favorite solo Beatles albums, period. I think Walls and Bridges is a masterpiece. Every song on it, Whatever Gets You Through the Night, is not a favorite.
Why so?
I'm not the biggest Ellen fan, except for Tiny Dancer.
Okay.
And the big hits. It just seemed like he was trying too hard for a number one, and it almost was like a gimmicky number one, and I've always had a problem with it. But I do really appreciate the Give Me Some Truth arrangement, because you can kind of hear him separated.
Okay. I'm glad to hear your point of view. My previous guest, Fernando Perdomo, is not a big fan of Whatever Gets You Through the Night. So you're not alone. I always loved it. I think that once you hear the earlier versions of that song, which was far more laid back, and I like those versions too, but Elton John just pumped it up and brought life to it. And I think they sounded great together. And that sax playing throughout really helped to make the song. Yeah. That's just my opinion anyway. So, but we're here to hear what you have to say.
Yes, and Mind Games, hands down. This is probably my favorite Lennon album at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Walls and Bridges, and it gets switched all the time. I love the song Mind Games. I love Tight As. I love Asuma Sen. One Day at a Time. I'm not the biggest falsetto Lennon fan. But everything else on it, and Out of the Blue is the greatest thing that he's written in his solo career, as far as I'll go. I mean, my namesake of my show, I Know,
mm-hmm.
is beautiful, and specifically this 2002 CD, where the vocals are up front.
You and I are in agreement about the album, definitely. And Out the Blue is one of his best ballads for sure, as is I Know. By the way, how come the title of your podcast show doesn't have parentheses around the second I know?
I don't know. I never actually thought about that. You're the first one to point that out.
If you're going to do it right, Hudson, come on. It's I know.
Talk to my graphic designer.
Are you one of those people who, so much attention's given to Plastic Ono Band and Imagine being the two best albums of John's career? Then John said he didn't do another great one until Double Fantasy. Are you one of those people that kind of like Mind Games and Walls and Bridges more because you think that it's overlooked?
No, I just think that I feel, and I'm a Yoko supporter,
mm-hmm.
but I think that he hit his musical peak without Yoko. As you look in the Beatles world, I mean, I feel like he was writing better songs with Cynthia overall when he was with Cynthia. I mean, and then when Yoko really came into the picture, I mean, there are some very good exceptions. I mean, not to bash anything that he did on the White Album, but Let It Be, his songs are not what Paul did on that album. And plug for your appearance on Joe Mayo's show, where he ranked the tracks. That was entertaining. That was.
Well, thank you. You know, yeah, but Yoko was by far and away the biggest influence, I think, ever on John Lennon's life and music. It's my opinion. We've debated this too on things we said today. And actually on Talk More Talk. You know, it's debatable, between Paul and Yoko, who was the bigger influence. But no, I wouldn't necessarily say that John's music was best when he was with Cynthia. It's all opinion here, but I think that Yoko opened up John's eyes to this whole other world altogether.
I agree.
Where everything can be considered art. And when you do that, your mind expands and you can be more creative than you were before. You know, it's a very debatable thing because John wrote so much brilliant stuff before Yoko came into the picture.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, Plastic Ono Band is a brilliant album. Imagine is a brilliant album. There's no doubt about it. Look at 1968 and 69. You know, you can say all you want about the Let It Be album. And in 1969, there was less of John than there was Paul. But still, John wrote about 10 songs that came out in 1969, which is not all that bad. And he still dominated the White Album.
Well, I think that's his best work ever, the White Album. But I think that as a song, like, I feel like he kind of was the Beatles in the beginning, like he was the driving force. And then when he met up with Yoko, like it kind of moved to Paul. Not to say that it was bad, because I think it was all equally good, but it was just kind of the time. I don't know.
We all have different opinions here, but, you know, he was the spokesperson for the Beatles. Paul didn't write as much as John in the early years, but he still contributed a lot to the Beatle albums and to some of John's songs. You know, it all depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
That's the beautiful thing about the Beatles. We all have different opinions about their music, where they were at various times in their lives, but, you know, Yoko was such a tremendous influence on him, and he became more of an artist through her, I think. So, but I'm glad that you love Mind Games and Walls and Bridges, because those are my top two Lennon albums too.
Good.
So,
the correct ones.
What's that?
The correct ones.
Hey, in your opinion.
Yes. And yours.
I will never knock the other ones, though.
Right.
You know. How about doing Ringo next?
Now, I don't have the records with me because I can't get to them, but number one right now, probably Vertical Man.
Okay.
The Mark Hudson years took a really long time to grow on me, and I know how much you adore those years.
There's a lot I love about that period, but there's a lot that I love post Mark Hudson too.
Yeah.
But let me get your take on it all.
Vertical Man, I mean, Time Takes Time is my favorite Ringo album, but I might be a little burnt out on it right now. I just feel a little burnt out on it at the moment. It may be the one, it's just so good. It's got a Beatlesque flavor, but it doesn't have like full-fledged Mark Hudson, because I feel like Ringo Rama was a little too Beatley for me. And Mark Hudson is a great producer, but Mark Hudson does like to scream Beatles, and
yes,
I don't. And I think he's the biggest Beatle fan on the world, other than me. And I feel like sometimes he just put a little too much Beatley stuff, and Vertical Man just has that balance I love King of Broken Hearts with George's last. Would that have been Marwa Blues' last slide guitar solo, though? Thinking now.
Well, it'd have to be on Brainwashed, whatever his last slide was. Have to think about that. But that,
it could have been
beautiful slide throughout. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But I mean, great. And I love What in the World I Love One. I'm not crazy about the Ringo Love Me Do redo, as you'll hear in my episode that I did with Steve Marinucci, your former co-host. We didn't exactly agree on that. Actually we did, but that it is my least favorite Ringo song, I won't lie. But I like it in the context of the album. That it's just so consistently good, and he just seems fresh and fun, and it's poppy and beautiful.
No, I agree with you totally. The thing that I like most about the Mark Hudson albums is first and foremost that the songs are all strong.
I'll agree.
That's always been the most important thing. And like you said, and what I've said for many years, is that Mark, this was his dream to produce a Beatle. He had his chance, and he delivered the goods. There's no doubt about it. But it's just there are times when it just seemed like his attitude was, Ringo, you're a Beatle. You should be proud of it. You should scream it. And there are times when it's just a little bit too much. He has more of an identity than just being a Beatle, but you have to have a proper balance, and there are times when I didn't even notice until somebody would point it out to me, something that was really Beatle-y in his stuff. It's like, I think therefore I rock and roll, the way it ends. I think therefore I rock and roll.
Yeah.
And it kind of ends like, why don't we do it in the road?
It does.
And I never thought about that until somebody pointed that out to me. But there'll probably be other instances that'll come along when I'll think, that really does sound like this. But, he had a great band, the Roundheads, through that whole period. Their songs sounded a lot like the Beatles. And if you think that was when Ringo shined the most, when it fit that kind of style, then you'd go more for the Mark Hudson albums. And I wouldn't blame anyone for doing that. But I want to see him grow beyond that, and I think he's done a lot of that since Mark Hudson. And yet I love the songs and the way that they were produced on those albums. All of them. Choose Love. I Want to Be Santa Claus, I think, was really good.
It's a fun record. It is.
Yeah, I love the whole approach on that album being half original songs and then half traditional songs. And then they all fit. I don't really like when he goes back and relies on Beatles, like Christmas Time Is Here Again, or doing Love Me Do, like you said.
Yeah.
But hey, I still appreciate everything that Mark Hudson did. And among the best albums that he did with Ringo, to me, are Choose Love, Ringo Rama, and Vertical Man. Those three albums. So, but I'm glad that you like Vertical Man a lot.
Yeah, the 90s is really a good album. It's really an overlooked decade for solo music. I mean, you've got two great Paul albums and two great Ringo albums. Will Berry's album, two live albums from Paul in the anthology, but the live album from Harrison. I mean, it's just a great decade.
Okay. Maybe at some point in the future, we'll talk about this live albums. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
All right. How about doing the Beatles next?
Now, this might be a tie. I'm going to make this a two-way tie, and I might be cheating a little bit, but my number one pick is the United States Rubber Soul. Now, I came to the UK version first. I won't lie. But I don't know what it is. I do not like Drive My Car. the Beatles version. I like Paul when he does it live later, but I cannot fathom Drive My Car. And I know
I've never heard anybody say that until now, but
it
tell me
drives.
why.
I don't know how to explain this, but it drives me crazy. The beep, 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 yeah. Da, 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 da. And Paul's vocals, it something about it just rubs me the wrong way.
He has a good R&B, earthy voice.
True.
On Drive My Car. You know, it's really fascinating you're saying this because, like many people who grew up on the Beatles in the 60s in the US, I was brought up on the American Rubber Soul first. And I didn't really convert to all the British albums. I had a few of them on vinyl, but until the CDs came out in 1987, I never really listened to the British Rubber Soul, but I've gotten used to it and I love it. But it's just, there's something about starting off the album with I've Just Seen a Face. For some reason, it just really works. It makes it more of a folk album to kick it off with that. So, but overall, what is it about the American Rubber Soul that you prefer over the British
one? It's really the I've Just Seen a Face opening the record, and then It's Only Love. I mean, it's different in a way, but It's Only Love is one of my favorite Beatles albums, and I think it's incredibly underrated. I mean, I love John's vocals on that song, and it feels out of place on, I feel like side 2 of Help is a little messed up in a way. Like, because if you look, Yesterday is like the second to last song. I feel like that should have been right in the center, and I've Just Seen a Face is just like in the middle before it, and it just feels like a mess, and that kind of just cleared it up for me. The UK Rubber Soul, I meant the US Rubber Soul, but
that's interesting. What about the fact that the UK one has more songs? What about the fact that the UK one has Nowhere Man on it?
Nowhere Man is a perfect song, and I miss it, but if you're getting rid of Drive My Car and What Goes On, I can live. I'm not a big fan of What Goes On either.
It seems to be one of the least favorites among Beatle fans. But you know what's really strange for me is that I've gotten so used to the British albums all these years, but yet anytime I hear It's Only Love, at the end of it, I go right into Girl. I'm still stuck on the American sequencing of those two songs. And same thing with I've Just Seen a Face in Norwegian Wood.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful, it's almost Dylan-esque in a way. I really hear you could have Bob Dylan singing those songs, and I would have loved to see Bob Dylan play on that album with the Beatles.
Well, you know, there was a big Dylan influence on the group, especially with John. But yeah, there's no doubt. Either way you look at it, it's a great album, American or UK version. But yeah, okay. American Rubber Soul.
And so then second place is Beatles for Sale.
Okay. So that's usually an album that's ranked at the bottom or close to it.
Yes. The UK Rubber Soul is my least favorite Beatles album. I will say that. But I love Beatles for Sale. I love the vocals on No Reply. I love 8 Days a Week. I love the covers. I mean, I really like the Beatles doing old rock and roll covers. I think it's fun. And I don't know, because the pressing that I have is Japanese, because I'm kind of a little audiophile nerd. It just is warm and fuzzy, and I don't know what's about it, but there's something special about that album.
It's interesting because you know, if you take into account surveys among Beatle fans, and they'll say Mr. Moonlight is the worst Beatles recording.
Love that.
And why do you love Mr. Moonlight? Defend it for us, please, because I love it too.
Good. Great vocal performances on it with John, and it's exciting and fun. I like the overlooked stuff. I'm not gonna lie. I always will stand up for the overlooked stuff, unless it's something that I'm not a fan of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Gone Troppo, which a lot of people have come to defense in the recent years. But that's just an album that still hasn't jumped with me.
Well, take it from an old timer here. Your views might change over the years.
Yes. And when we talk about Paul, you'll see, because you're going to be very happy with my Paul choice.
Okay. But with Beatles for Sale, I still think the Beatles' weakest album, and it's debatable what that is still a strong album.
Yeah. I mean, I would maybe give the weakest Beatle album a 9.89. I mean, out of 10. And that's just me, but there is no bad Beatles song. I mean, the worst Beatles song is miles ahead of the best Bob Dylan song. Solo, I won't compare, because I think there are some solo songs that are better than Beatles songs. But that
definitely.
I mean, I can take Beautiful Night over Drive My Car any day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can take I can take I Me Mine and whatever the other song is on Let It Be That
For
George,
You Blue?
For You Blue, yes. It is the afternoon, so excuse my exhaustedness. I could take anything When All Things Must Pass for the songs. I really could.
Yeah.
They're bad songs, but
no, I will agree with you. There are plenty of solo Beatles songs that are better than Beatles songs. Just like there's some Beatles songs that are better than some solo songs. It's never across the board one way.
Yeah. It's just a different catalog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's still one and the same, because it's still the three primary songwriters and their creations, and Ringo developing as a songwriter in his creations.
I will agree. I will definitely agree with that, because I think he's become a pretty decent songwriter. I mean, no John or George, but definitely
or Paul.
Yeah, or Paul.
Yeah.
And no Dylan, but he's become a good songwriter, and I think that's something that gets overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think you've said in the past that you always ask Ringo about his songwriting when you interview him, and you said that he's always surprised when you bring it up.
Yeah, I wish that more people would ask him about it, and I wish that he would go more into detail about those songs, because he's written with so many different people. Just look at all the people he's written with after Mark Hudson, and it's a lot of very impressive names. Van Dyke Parks, Richard Marx, Dave Stewart, more Gary Burr, Dave Nicholson, who's a country songwriter. It's a lot of really great people. Peter Frampton, he wrote a song with. I like hearing that he's worked with these different people and in some way helped to construct songs.
Yeah, I wish he would work back with Vinnie Poncia. I really do.
I wish I knew what's going on with Vinnie Poncia.
I'll tell you that after, about the show, because I may found something.
Okay, please do. All right, we are up to Mr. McCartney.
Now, I could have grabbed about 20 albums, because, I mean, Paul's solo work is always fresh in my head. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the solo material is, because, I mean, I do a podcast on it, so I've always got to be listening to it. But, and the record is on my wall, so I didn't want to take it down. But my number one choice at the moment, and Ken is going to be very surprised, because this was my least favorite Paul McCartney album for a very long time. Uh-huh. And it was Ken's favorite. And my number one gravitated is Flowers in the Dirt.
Okay. Very nice. So why has it gravitated to this status now?
Just something about it. I mean, coming from the Russian album, going right into this, My Brave Face, I think is the best thing that he has done in his solo career, along with Beautiful Night. Those two are tied, with Junior's Farm right up there, obviously. But
I like how you say obviously, like everybody is in agreement with you.
Yeah.
Hey,
like
Junior's Farm's one of my favorite songs from him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Which is good. So, but I'm not a big fan of Motor of Love. But other than that, I love every single song on that album. And I think that Elvis Costello really kind of brought him up. And I think Press to Play was a pretty okay album. I mean, I enjoy it a lot, but it's mid-tier for me still. Like, I think it's a good album, but I wouldn't rank it in his top 5 or 10 maybe. But around that 15, 17 area, which are still like 8 out of 10 albums.
You know where I rank it?
Yes.
Number 2.
Number 1.
No.
Yeah, number 2.
Yeah. Flowers is number 1 for me.
Yeah. Okay. And I think number 3 is my runner-up, if I remember my things we said today knowledge.
Yeah. Although I must say, to me, Flaming Pie and Chaos and Creation are pretty equal. So
I will say this. I'm going to defend 3 albums in a row. Well, not counting the Russian album. I think that those 3 albums, Flaming, Driving, and Chaos, all have very personal songs. Production-wise, on Driving Rain, I don't see it, but lyrically, you could see him recovering from Linda's death in those songs. I mean, I feel like you can hear it, and that's something that I really enjoy hearing. I mean, he was in love and with happy with She Who Must Not Be Named, but
yeah,
that was only for a short-lived time, but you can see that, and I think it's good to see Paul kind of recover, because I think that's what he needed at that point.
And you know that Driving Rain, Your Love and Flame was for
Linda. Yeah, I meant whatever.
No, Heather.
Yeah, that's who I meant.
Yeah, and as was the song Heather.
Yeah.
So she was definitely on his mind on that album.
Yeah. That's the only word you're not allowed to say on my show. It's Heather Mills. But I figured I'll just say a couple more runners up. Back to the Egg. Fantastic album. I think the best Wings lineup, maybe. I mean, Laurence Juber, I think, is the MVP that he's played with. And I wish that they had stuck together. I would love to see Paul perform with Laurence just at a concert or something. And that hasn't happened. I mean, I don't think Paul's mentioned Laurence at all in the last
he rarely mentions any member of Wings.
Yeah.
He always says, we did this, we did that. He doesn't mention the other band members all that often. Once in a while, Henry McCullough's name comes up for the guitar solo on My Love. But I'll tell you one thing, because I've interviewed many members of Wings now through the years, and I'll always remember, I interviewed Steve Holley back in the 80s and a few times since then. And he said to me, he's very proud of the time he spent with Paul, but he's so much a better drummer now from all the more experience that he gained. And this is in the late 80s. Flash forward to 2021. Laurence Juber was fantastic when he was in Wings. If you see him in concert now, you'll be completely floored. He's one of the greatest guitarists. They've only gotten better. Denny Sywell is an amazing drummer. You get to see him live, and he's been in a jazz trio for a number of years. And you see him at the Fest for Beatle fans. He's a tremendous drummer. They're all great musicians. I'd love to see Paul work with them again, but as Paul has said, without Linda, it can't be a Wings reunion.
I think he should just play with one individually here and there. like play with Denny Sewell when you're in LA and Laurence.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a bad. I would love to see them mix lineups. Like I would love to see Denny Lane and Denny Sewell and Joe English do something together. I mean, because Joe English. I mean, I know Joe English is very far out of the public eye and
Yeah.
can't play drums anymore, but an amazing vocalist. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
Must Do
must do
Something
some.
About It is one of my favorites on that album.
Mine too.
Yeah.
You know,
And
even though, I mean, we're going to go off on a tangent here, but I will say that, you know, I love the whole Wings period. There's no doubt about it. I think Paul became more creative on his own after Wings, but he really wanted Wings to be established as a band to the
yeah,
point where, you know, live 75 and 76, Denny Lane sang lead on 5 songs. You know, Jimmy McCulloch got his 1 song, but on Wings at the Speed of Sound, every member of Wings got a lead vocal. And I often wonder what would have happened if Jimmy and Joe hadn't left. You know,
yeah,
what if the next album would it have been more like Speed of Sound? Would everybody have
exactly.
been given a lead vocal? It would have been really interesting. But the only time that happened is when it was on that album. And the people who are more into Wings because they think of it as just really a Paul McCartney album, they will probably look at Speed of Sound as being a weak album because there wasn't enough Paul.
It's one of my favorite Paul albums.
But as a concept of Wings being a band,
Yeah,
you know, it was they were a fully fledged band by then, even more so than they were. They were a band in the early years too.
yeah,
But yeah, it's just a shame that they didn't try to continue with that format because that's what part of what made the Beatles exciting and interesting was knowing that you had 4 lead vocalists in the same group.
yeah,
And like less than 1% of all bands are like that that have ever been created.
right.
And you know, I love the fact that Speed of Sound had every member, including Linda, doing Cook of the House. She was
Yeah,
represented there. But what if London Town had been the same thing? 5 band members, 5 different lead vocals, more Paul than the others, but still the others were spread out. Would have been kind of interesting. But I wasn't really asking what your favorites are. I'm just mainly asking which one
yeah.
you listen to the most.
Those
And
are the
right,
ones.
okay. And Flowers in the Dirt, do you like even the very odd stuff that's on there, like Don't Be Careless Love?
That one's it's probably my least favorite song on the album and Motor of Love. Well, no, I like Motor of Love quite a bit, but I'm not a big fan of Don't Be Careless Love.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think yeah, I wish Veronica was on Flowers in the Dirt because I think it's a much stronger song than Don't Be Careless Love. The I don't remember. I'm not very familiar with Elvis Costello's career, but I do know Veronica and Allison. That's about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't Be Careless Love was the one song that took the longest for me to like on that album. But once I got hooked onto it, I was really hooked because it's really cool to start off with those a cappella vocals
Yeah,
and very high vocals too. I thought he was really pushing the envelope there with his vocals, a very high range. And definite Elvis Costello influence there because the song doesn't go necessarily melodically where you thought it would. So, but it still makes sense once you get used to it. And yeah, Flowers is my favorite. It has been for a very long time now.
how long?
And I don't know, probably 20 years, maybe more. Uh, it's just all the way through, consistently strong. I love the variety on it. Certain songs on there, like this one, is what I call an absolutely perfect pop song from
Should have been
start
a
to
number
finish.
one.
Hey, My Brave Face should have been a number one, but
So shouldn't have put it there.
I have my problems with put it there.
What? I need to hear this. I need to hear
No,
this.
there are certain McCartney songs that go on too long. There are certain McCartney songs that are too short. Put It There is way too short. And it doesn't sound like it was a fully developed song. In other words, it doesn't really have like a bridge or a middle eight or something. You could have a short song and it still feels complete. Like I Will from the White
Yeah.
Album. Sounds like a complete song and it's only a minute 48, something like that. Put It There needed something more from me. I love the melody, no doubt about it. I love the sentiment. I love the fact that he put in a phrase that his father used to use. But Put It There, I still love the song. Don't get me wrong. I'll never turn
Okay.
it off.
Okay.
But I just wish he did a little bit more work on it. And then there's the flip side of that, which is songs that go on too long. I think Motor of Love could have been trimmed.
Yeah, I think
Take a
Long-Tailed Winter Bird could have been trimmed from McCartney 3 by like 30 seconds.
That's hardly a criticism. Take out 30 seconds of the song. But no, Motor of Love goes on a little bit too long. Yeah. Wine Dark Open Sea goes on too long.
No, it does not. That's a
Yeah,
perfect length.
okay. All right.
I'm gonna when your episode with Sam on Off the Ground, I'm gonna be yelling in the YouTube comments, what is wrong with you? Wine Dark is the best song on the album.
I'm kind of stunned that he put that on Pure McCartney.
The only song on that album.
Is it?
Yeah, there's nothing from Flowers. There's nothing from Driving Rain. That's I've got my problems with that.
Well, Flowers in the Dirt he avoided because the box set was about to come out. Still, he shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
There should have been something to represent Flowers. And yeah, nothing from Driving Rain?
Nothing.
Wow. Should have at least put Lonely Road in there.
I think Driving Rain's his most overlooked album. So
Driving Rain and Press to Play.
Beg to differ.
All right. That's what we'll do. We'll do a show on those two albums combined. Drive people crazy.
Yeah. Hey, Driving Rain 20th anniversary is coming right up.
Yeah, I'm sure he's got something planned for that.
Yeah. I hope there's a vinyl issue for that. I mean, I hope there's an archive coming. I mean, there wouldn't be much because you put everything on the kitchen sink on that album, but
Hey, you never know if there's anything. Paul always has leftover stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So many of his albums could have been double albums. I mean, Off the Ground especially.
Off the Ground could have been a triple album. I mean, the regular album's almost 55 minutes.
Yeah. But that was, for me personally, only because of the CD singles that came out at the time. That was such an exciting time for me. I look forward to every CD single, getting the song that was off the album and then 3 more songs. Wow, every time. So, what a great time to be a McCartney fan. And the fact that so many of those songs are really good. You know, Kicked Around No More, Long Leather Coat. My God, great songs. Why weren't they on the album?
Do you have that Germany release, the complete Off the Ground with the one?
No, but I have all the songs. I have seen it. Yeah. So, all right. This has been really interesting. We're going to have you back at some time in the future. And I'm going to make sure that in the description box, if people want to check out your show, they'll know where to find it. How many shows have you done now?
Well, it's close to 50, but some of them the audio is distorted. None of them that I've done with guests, just me. So that'll be like 40 something. And then I'm going to do a 50th show with a bunch of people. And Ken, you'll be back on someday.
Okay. Some days. There's always a Beatle or a solo Beatles song in my head. And you know that from my podcast shows.
You must drive Ethan Alexanian crazy. Because I got kicked off a Zoom call because of my puns.
It drives him crazy, huh? I'll have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And you know, you're not the youngest podcaster.
I know, and it's scary.
Because Lucas Hanner.
No, Lucas is older than me, but
is he?
Yes, by like only a few months. But Oliver, the one that I sent you, is younger than me.
Okay. We'll have to have him on.
Yeah.
You'll be dethroned.
Oh,
For this short time, you'll be the youngest one on the show.
yeah. Good.
But it was great to have you here. We'll have you on back again. And thanks to all of you for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so. Check out my other podcast for things we said today and Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. And also, I don't mention it that often, but I do have a website, kenmichaelsradio.com. And there's loads of audio interviews on there too. So if you like what you've been seeing on this channel, you can just hear the audio of, well, those interviews were strictly audio to begin with, but there's plenty of really great people that I've interviewed connected with the Beatles on my website. That's kenmichaelsradio.com. All right, thanks again for watching. Thank you, Hudson.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you next time.